Yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline Comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday night as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline.
Hola, guests. Welcome to Wednesday Wham. Tonight we are joined by Silverline Sunday regular Tom Mason.
Hello, everyone.
He's going to have a unique perspective on tonight's topic. Before we jump into tonight's topic, I want to thank everybody who helped out, promoted, or contributed to my crowdfunder for Divinity number 4. It was very much appreciated. You guys are wonderful. I do this for you guys because I'm not getting rich. But I do it because I love the medium and I love my fans. So thank you very, very much. And now on to the show. Tonight, my Muse eloped and didn't leave a forwarding address. What?
Thing. I don't think writer's block exists any more than lawyer's block exists, or accountant's block exists, or doctor block exists, or anything like that. I think people run into an obstacle, and with their story, and it's not a story, or they run out of ideas because it's not a story, or they have not developed the tools to overcome the obstacle that they've hit in trying to develop their idea into a story. But that's not writer's block. That's just writing. That's the job.
And
so that's my unique.
Mostly, I've heard from almost every single writer that I've ever talked to that to get the job done, you need to literally sit down and write. It doesn't have to be a grand opus or anything like that. But in order to train yourself to think of it as a profession, as your job, you need to write every single day, even if it's just one word. Hey, yeah. Pops.
Because here's what's going to happen. If your book gets published, if your comic book script gets an assignment, if your TV episode gets, if you get an assignment for a TV show or whatever, there's a deadline. And if you haven't trained yourself how to meet that deadline, and you believe that writing is some sort of dilettante exercise for rich people who can just write whenever they feel inspired, That's not the way it works. The industry of writing is based around deadlines, and you've got to be able to find a way to get that script in every Friday, or every third Thursday of the month, or whatever it is. You got to turn it in. So what are you going to do? You can't go to your boss, your producer, or your editor, or whatever, and say, "Oh, I'm blocked. I couldn't think of any ideas.
I'm just not feeling it."
Yeah, I'm an artist. I can't be expected to turn out greatness on a schedule. If you want my genius, you're going to have to wait. It's like, no, the business of writing does not work like that.
Or art.
Or art.
One of the best motivators is the fact that you ain't getting a paycheck, so you can't pay your bills. So, okay,
Right.
let's come up with something.
I have had artists, my pencilers, who said, like, I'm just not feeling it. I don't know when I'll be able to get you pages, because...
Well, you just say, well, then you ain't getting paid.
Right.
Well, I mean, this is way back when we were both counting on getting paid, and I couldn't get paid till I got pages.
Right, because you're the inker.
Yeah, because I'm the inker. I'm like, well, just
That's
do
the
it.
other thing too, especially in the business of writing, except for novels. If you're writing comic books or writing TV shows or writing movies, there's a whole line of people behind you that are waiting for what you're doing. And
It's an assembly line process.
It's an assembly line process. You may not like that, and that may be ugly to you, and that may interfere with your ability to create art, because you can't think of it as commerce. But when you take the assignment, when you take the job, if you're a comic book writer, there's a penciler, there's an inker, there's a letterer, there's a colorist, there's a printer, there's a distributor, there's a retailer, there's a fan. They're all waiting for that. Mm-hmm. And the TV people, there's actors, there's the crew on the set, there's the editor, there's the broadcast network. They're all waiting. And so and the thing is, in assembly line writing like that, if you can't do it, there's 1,000 other people
waiting in the wings.
And that's another big motivator too. So Martin said there's, you don't get paid, but yeah, you also get replaced. So if you have trouble writing on that kind of schedule, either don't try that job or figure out the tricks that you can get to motivate your brain.
Even literary books like Stephen King, they're getting a retainer up front. Yes. They're getting an advance on their book, and you have got to earn that advance. I mean, otherwise they'll take it back.
Right.
And you've already spent it.
Yes, because the advance is really supposed to be, in general, most people are not Stephen King, so they don't get an advance that allows them to live for 2 years while they write their
Magnus opus.
Right. So it's mostly just it's like holding money. I think I forget who it was. It might have been Jim Zub, who broke down the graphic novel advances from Scholastic or HarperCollins or whatever.
I saw that.
And it's basically by the time you do everything and you take 2 years to make your graphic novel, it's $4 an hour or something like that.
Yeah, it's like less than minimum wage.
Right. So it's like a $30,000 advance, but spread out over 2 years, and with all the other expenses and stuff that go with it, it's $4 an hour.
Yeah.
So it's
$30,000. Well, $30,000. Well, $30,000 is like a 1 year low end 1 year salary. So if you take 2 years, to do it, then that's less than
$30,000 is towards getting down there towards the bottom of the earth, towards the poverty level.
Yeah, and chances are your agent, if you have an agent, is going to take 10% off the top of that, and then you've got bills to pay, and that's before you even start to create. So
that's right.
So then you come up with a process to try and hammer that thing out as fast as you can, right?
Yes, or you have an understanding partner who has a really good job with healthcare benefits and other stuff. or you have money in the bank, or you're a trust fund person, or you have, some other means to.
So I guess the hope is then that the royalties pay out on the long term.
Yes, but it's a long. I mean, I'm sort of sidetracking here, but it's sort of a long process, because if you deliver it, so it's 2024. If you sign today, you deliver it in 2026. It takes a year to publish it and get it marketed. So that's 2027. Your
Whoa.
first royalty statement doesn't come until
Whoa,
2028.
whoa. So even after you finish the product or the thing, it still takes a year for it to get published?
Yes. Because
Why?
the publisher has a massive scheduling document,
Ah,
and they have 2 publishing seasons, spring and fall. And
right.
you've got to be able to fit into the spring list or the fall list. And so they'll try to figure out which is better for the book. So it could be a year, it could be a year and a half. It will not be less than a year.
So
It's
even
unlike
with the Wonders,
comics, which has got a 3 to 6 month lead time.
Right.
Books are completely different.
Yes.
wow.
So
Wow, I
you're
didn't realize that there was still after once you delivered the product that there was still a 1 year lead time.
yeah.
That's crazy.
And you don't get the royalty statement until a year after it's published. And that means that you may not have broken into the royalties. You may still owe on your advance.
Well, you better get those muses going fast.
That's right. You don't have time to hit writer's block or
Yeah.
writer's obstacles, as Tom calls them.
That's right. Writer's obstacles. The things to do.
Right.
Wow.
So once you hit a writer's obstacle, what are some of the tricks of the trade that you use to motivate yourself to the next page, the next phase, the next character, whatever?
Is that for me?
Yes.
I'll take it. All right. So I try to avoid getting into that situation where I have an obstacle. And that is by trying to figure out if my idea is actually a story. Like, what is it? I've got an idea for, X, Y, or Z. Is this a comic book idea? Is this a movie idea? Is this a TV show idea? Is this a short story idea? What is it? What am I looking at? And I would just start noodling around, and I will see what comes of it. And if nothing comes of it, I'll put it aside. I got an old-fashioned filing cabinet. I got a notebook. I got Post-it notes scattered all over around with little ideas that just fizzle because there's nothing. I can't make the thing into something. It's just an idea, but I'm saving it
Because you may use one of those things in something else.
Yeah, at some point I'll need something like that, or revisiting it with a fresh set of eyes a couple of weeks later. Suddenly I might go, oh, all right, I know what I can do, and I'll make more notes. And one of the things I never do is I never get mad at myself, or I never put myself down. When the idea fizzles, it's not, oh, I must be stupid now, I can't write, or I've forgotten how to do things. I'm, oh, bad me. It's like I never view myself in a negative light like that. They're just ideas. They're just things.
And see, I think that is a huge deal, actually. A lot of people who are just learning to write, they'll hit an obstacle and they'll all of a sudden, it's psychological.
Yes.
They'll tell themselves that they cannot do it, and then they can't do it.
Right.
It's like that in sports too. If you hit a hitting slump, you freak yourself out and you continue the hitting slump.
And you can see it happen with baseball players, especially where it's just like they do themselves in because they try too hard, they curse themselves out, they get mad at themselves, and they really need some kind of therapy to sort of,
and then they get performance anxiety.
Right. And I think some people who want to be writers do that as well. They beat themselves up too hard. And it's like, no, it's not. I'm never working on the greatest idea ever, and I'm never working on the thing that's going to change my life. Like it's
Right.
I never get that psychologically bogged down in the thing itself because I have no control. I have no control over the work becoming anything other than what it is.
That's a good attitude to have, because if you go into it thinking this is going to be my magnum opus,
Right,
all of a sudden you've painted yourself into a corner.
Yeah.
and nothing's ever good enough, and that's
Right.
and people have no control over that. I've read great books that went from other writers that I absolutely love, and they did not catch on. Like nobody else likes them. They weren't made into movies. There was never a sequel. The author never wrote another book or whatever. But that book I still love. And there's no control an author has over their stuff once it goes out into the world. You can't control people's reaction to it. So it could be, you could be royally panned, especially now in the age of the internet, or you could be royally praised, or you could be somewhere in the middle. And that's
Right.
that's
So
the
now,
chance to take.
how do you determine if you're writing your story and then all of a sudden you've hit this so-called roadblock, which isn't a roadblock, but you've now become kind of stuckish.
Right.
How do you determine that the idea is how do you determine that the idea is wrong and that
No longer feasible?
no longer feasible, or is part of the, like, how do you realize it's not just like a scene that you like, or how do you realize that it's not just a thing that you really want, but it's not really part of the story or part of the...
You've gone off track?
Yeah.
Well, I give it some time, give it a few days, give it a week, give it whatever, because I assume here's the thing. Am I writing it for myself or am I writing it on an assignment? Because it's two different approaches. If I'm writing it for myself, I just put it aside and I'll look at it every couple of days. I'll think about it while I go for a walk. I'll think about it while I'm at the gym. I will, it'll sort of occupy my subconscious. I keep a notepad by the side of my bed in case something happens to me while I'm drifting off to sleep. And so I'll just let it sit there. And I will, sooner or later, if I don't come up with anything new, I just don't go back to it for a while. And that's if it's just for me. Like most people, I have tons of sort of unfinished things that sort of fizzled out or didn't go anywhere, or I couldn't come up with the third act, or I wasn't happy with it, or whatever. And, I think every writer does it, but I'm not mad about that. I'll get back to them, or I won't. If it's an assignment and I have a limited amount of time, then I really have to hustle. And so what I'll do is, if it's a TV show, I've got other writers on call that I can brainstorm with. I have a producer, although it's generally you don't want to call your producer and say, "Hey, I'm stuck." But I have a readers group of good friends that I can share stuff with. I have a couple of people that I can just call and say, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think?" And I will we'll bounce stuff around for like 20 minutes. I will sort of go back to one of the things I'll do is I will leave the computer and I will get an old-fashioned notepad and I will go sit somewhere else. And I will just start jotting down what I think are the important parts of the story and basically rewrite it longhand in a coffee shop or, an outdoor park or, a restaurant or something, and just start making notes.
Change of venue.
And because that really, you can get stuck in the place. And you can also get stuck. I think you can get stuck with the tools. So I'll get away from the computer and I'll grab a pen and my notepad and off I go.
So now another way to get past that is to maybe target the end goal of how the story has to end. Like, do you usually know that, okay, the story has to end like this? I know that has to happen. So then you work your way backwards from there.
Yes. So usually I've plotted it out. So I've got a beginning and a middle and an end. And it's just a matter of how do I get there? And then, So if I'm working from an outline, which I recommend most people do,
yep,
I will write the parts that are easy and the scenes that I really love. And I will write those first because that will get the engine going. And then I'll find a scene that I really like. Oh, I like this. What will lead up to that? And then I'll go back in and I'll start filling in the gaps. And then before you know it, I have this sort of patchwork of scenes that I've written from the outline. And then I go back and I look at the outline and figure out where I've gone horribly wrong and adjust the outline or adjust the script accordingly to sort of make all the pieces go together. So I'll do it. I almost never, and maybe this is a function of adult ADHD, I don't know, but I will almost never write straight through. Like I don't write from page 1 to page 30. if I have an
You have,
outline.
you have to prime the pump first with little bits and pieces.
Yes, I do. And I always start, because I know that some people sit at the computer and they look at the blank space and they're like, oh, I can't do that. How do I get started? I find the scene that I really love in the project and I really want to write, and I will write that scene. And that will generally fire up the engine so that I want to write more, and I keep going. And
No.
another,
Go ahead, Martin.
Okay, so I was just going to go back to the. So you said you had a whole bunch of projects that have fizzled out.
oh yeah,
So how do you determine that project has kind of hit that wall, and you're like, oh, okay, this is kind of a neat idea, but yeah, it's not cutting the mustard. Like how do you determine? Like, is it just because you can't figure out how to write beyond it, or is it because you sit down and you actually realize, okay, well, the story is here and it's sitting in front of me, and I'm realizing that for some reason this whole kettle of fish that I got in front of me is not quite coalescing the way it should. Like what's your trigger to kind of say, okay, time to cut it and run?
Well, so many things can happen. One is for me anyway, you'll pick up or you'll read online, or you'll see in Variety or the Hollywood Reporter that somebody else is doing your exact same idea. And it's like, they didn't steal it from me. It's just
No.
we had the same sort of great, wouldn't it be great if, this happened?
Well, there's 7 billion people on the planet, so
right. So somebody's going to do that. And he didn't have access to my head. So how did they obviously didn't steal it. So, so that's one thing that stops it. It's like somebody else is working on a very similar idea. Or another thing is that I start to read it and I realize, well, maybe this isn't an idea I want to live with for a while. Like, I don't like where it's going. It's sort of what I've written has sort of betrayed my original idea. And I'm more in love with my original idea than I am with what I've developed. So I want to go back to that. So I'm going to put it aside until there's that. And another is that I just run out of ideas. And I get to a point where it's like, if it's a comic book or a TV show, it's like, I can't see issue 4. I can't see episode 7. I can't see where this goes. There's not enough oomph in here to sort of drive a story where I'm interested. And if I'm not interested, then I'm sure as hell thinking the audience is not going to be interested.
Right.
And so it just sort of comes early on. There was stuff that I would not let go of because, I can make this work. And then it's like, no, I really learned over time that sometimes I can't make it work and I need to put it aside until my brain is in a better space.
Fish or cup bait.
Yeah. And really don't feel bad about it.
Yeah.
It's like,
Well, and this is a very good example. I touched on this a week or so ago when you were on with me. I've been writing almost my entire life. I know I'm an inker, and it wasn't until I hit 60 that I started actually writing comic books, but that doesn't mean I haven't been writing.
right.
And I had this idea, and I just looked at this now. I filed this with the Writers Guild of America in 2011. And I've just recently dug out the paperwork again, and I'm going through it, and I'm reading what I had originally, pages of all this, these ideas. I'm like, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. This character needs to be completely redone.
Right.
And, I've come back to it now and I'm looking at it and it's really firing me up again, but I'm seeing everything that I liked the first time around that I don't like this time around, years later when I'm looking at it. And especially one particular character, his backstory, it was just so blah, and I'm like, there's got to be more motivation behind what he's doing,
Right.
And in a case like that, some people find it helpful to meditate. Just go and empty your mind. Just sit and meditate. Go sit in the park, whatever. For me, I go to bed at night when all the chaos of the day is done and it's quiet in the bedroom. Maybe I have the windows open like I have now, and you can hear the crazy cicadas in the background.
Right.
And when everything is quiet, then I start to think on it, and I just let thoughts drift through my brain in the quiet of the night, and all of a sudden, bing, yes, that's perfect. So some people find meditation or just trying to empty your mind and just let yourself go and stream of consciousness.
And that works. And I know a friend of mine was a TV writer. He was working on a TV pilot that he was trying to develop on his own. And he took the exact opposite approach, which is he filled his head with as much noise as possible. So what he did is his TV pilot was about a private eye who was a TV show private eye, an actor who was a TV show private eye for years. His career dried up, and then he fell into the idea of being a real private eye. And so in order to develop how that might look, my friend loaded up on 70s and 80s TV private eye shows, and he just started watching them and binging on them again and again to see what the tropes were, to see what everybody was doing and see how everybody handled certain things. And that he poured it into his brain. And that way he sort of figured out the structure of a classic private eye TV episode. He figured out what scenes work and what scenes don't work, what scenes not to do, how not to steal from these guys. So if he was writing a scene, he'd go, oh, no, that's from Canon, or that's from Barnaby Jones or whatever. I can't do that. And so it sort of spurred him along to see what other people did and go in a different direction. But he filled his head up with as much noise as possible before.
Then we ended up with The Mentalist.
And sifted through it.
Yeah, and sifted through it.
What was the show that he ended up with?
He couldn't sell it, but it's not for lack of trying. It's a really good pilot.
It sounds good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
another thing that I've got notes over here. I always make notes.
Right.
Another thing that some people do is, like you said before, keep a notebook and refer back to it. You write your ideas down, little plot, even if things that you hear when you're walking along, people saying, "Oh, that was a neat phrase that person just said,"
right?
Or things that pop into your head just randomly. Write it all down. Keep all these in a notebook, and then refer back to them, and it might spark something.
Yes. Another thing that I find really helpful is to not finish stuff. And so what I mean by that is, if you're a writer, don't finish the scene. Leave it hanging for the next day. If you're
for the next day, I was like,
the next day. If
don't you want to get paid?
If you're working on a novel, don't finish the chapter. Leave the end of the chapter for the next day. If you're an artist, don't finish the page. Leave the last panel. Get the last panel ready, loosely pencil it or keep it in breakdown form or whatever. But that way, when you get there the next day, you have something to do. It's not blank. Oh, I got to finish this. And then you finish the chapter. Then you finish the page. Then you finish whatever. And that rolls into the next thing. So it's a way to sort of, it's not blank anymore when you start every day.
Another thing that a lot of people get hung up on is, or that derails them, is that there's just too much going on around them. So you really need to have a dedicated space for writing most of the time. Yes, you do. Or art. I have a studio. I'm in my studio.
Right.
I can close the door. You have to sit down. You actually have to just make it happen. You have to designate a separate space. And this puts you in the headspace that when you go into that room, you're there to work.
Yes.
So like sitting at the dining room table and trying to do it, and the kids are running around, or TV's on downstairs. That is not, you're not putting yourself into a professional headspace.
No.
And you need to do it every day. You need to force yourself to sit down and write, even if it's just nonsense, even if it's just stream of consciousness or thinking about some traumatic experience you had in the past. You need to sit down and try to write it out. Set a timer if you have to. I'm going to write for 10 minutes and I need to get this written in this amount of time. Try to jot it down quickly. Jot your dreams down.
Yes. Jot down conversations that you overhear. I hear, when I go out shopping at Costco, I overhear tons of weird stuff. And I can only imagine what the actual conversation is, because all I hear is the snippet, and the snippet is fascinating. And so, jot that stuff down. and start to fiddle with it. And the other thing that I think is important is that you've got to figure out, like, you can't just sit down when you're inspired. You've got to sit down, and I know people have regular jobs, people have a schedule or whatever. I used to get up. When I figured out I wanted to do this and I had a regular full-time job, I would just get up an hour earlier.
There you go. But that's a discipline that you need to build,
Yeah.
because it's so easy to say, "Oh, I'm not this morning. I'm just too tired."
Yeah, but it's the same discipline you would do if you were exercising or going to the gym or whatever. So I would get up an hour earlier, and I would dedicate that full hour to just writing.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't screw around with email. I wouldn't, whatever. That was my writing time. And then in the evening, if I had more time after work and I wasn't too tired, I would just sort of fiddle around with the thing I wrote in the morning. Like I would edit it.
And that builds discipline.
Yes. And then that would also, and by doing that in the evening, that would sort of get me excited to start writing the next morning, because I'd sparked some new ideas with the stuff that I had by reading the stuff that I'd written. And then when the next day rolled around, I'd be like, oh, I know exactly what to do, because I figured this out last night. And that, I can't say that I was friends with him, but I certainly knew him. And that was Gil Kane. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that Gil, he said he did, whether he did this or not, I don't know. But he said every morning when he got up to start, he would always do about an hour of structure drawings. Like he would just get his art paper, his artboard or whatever, and he would just start doing skeletal sketches for structure. And that would warm up his hand.
Yeah, I have heard other artists say, I'm doing warm-up sketches.
Right.
Like, warm-up? I've never done warm-up art in my life. I just sit down and I stare at it for a while, and then I go. That's my technique, Yeah, I sit and stare at the page, and I look it over, and I break it down in my head and stuff like that, and then I go. Yeah.
You can do that. I don't think some people can't. I think some people have to get their motor started.
Yeah. But that's art too, not writing. But we're covering both of it: writer's block, artistic block, creativity block. Say you're an artist and you have to turn out a piece for somebody, and you are just drawn a dead blank. Go to the museum. Go to a museum and walk through the museum and let it inspire you. You might hit on something creative that, oh yeah, that might work, or just go completely off on a tangent and try something new artistically that you've never done before, watercolor or sculpture, or mess around with collage or whatever like that, and that might jolt you into an idea that you can use. Like doing something completely 180 from what you're used to doing, a lot of times will get the creative juices flowing.
I see from Facebook, I have a number of art friends who still take life drawing classes.
Oh yeah.
And we'll also go to places like the park and draw people in the park, or they'll go to a coffee shop and they'll draw the customers sitting in their weird positions, enjoying their drink. And so I think anything you can sort of do to break up the supposed monotony of sitting at your desk, mm-hmm. I would encourage anybody to do that.
Another person I talked to about writing said that when they're getting hung up and it just doesn't seem to be working, and they're having a trouble with a perspective of a character, switch and write from a different character's point of view for a while, and that way it will open up a new avenue of thought, so that by the time you go back to the character you're supposed to be writing, you've got a different perspective.
One of the things that also helps me anyway is to, especially for dialogue, is to read it out loud. Ooh. Like be the actor of your little play and role play both parts. Like if you have two characters talking and you can't figure out where the conversation is going to go, act it out. Pretend you're both characters.
I want to hear your female voice.
I am sure it would be insulting and it would get me canceled. But it's a great way to sort of let your brain take over and just do it rapid fire. Don't try to think. Just pretend that you're the character.
Hmm.
and try to roll with it as best you can. It'll make you seem silly, but it's sort of like when your kids were babies and you talk to them, they weren't really listening. And I don't know about anybody else, but I sort of felt silly trying to carry on a conversation with an infant. However, you sort of get into it and you start rolling with it and it becomes fun. And that's sort of what you do as a writer. You want to role play.
And some of those ad libs might be brilliant.
Yes. You might not have thought of them if you were just staring at your screen.
What do you think, Martin? You've got kids. You could bounce your ideas off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So my boys come up with crazy ideas. So,
yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah,
Run things past your children and see what they say.
Or you just wait for them to bring the sketchbook to you and you're like, oh, what's this? Oh, that's a really cool idea, man.
That's what I would do.
I don't know where you got that from, but okay.
I wouldn't try to prompt my kids when they were younger, but I would pay very close attention to the stuff that they were creating and saying and how they said it, how they transpose words, how they transpose letters. I've gotten a lot of alien speech patterns from listening to my kids sort of malaprop different words or mix up sentence structure or whatever.
So my boys have a interesting way of pronouncing like Canada and mosquito is like I don't know why, but they all say it the same way. So it's just very like so Canada they can do Canada, and then for mosquito. It's like okay, like it's just little weird anachronisms and like all right, I don't know where you guys are getting that from, but they can't change it either, so it's really interesting.
We had the grandkids over last night, not willingly, but the parents had other commitments elsewhere. So we had the grandkids over, and one of them dropped a tiny, tiny little Lego into something, and I said, well, I'm gonna have to go get my tweezers to get it out. And the 3-year-old goes, Nana's gonna get sneezers, and that's what we started calling it all the whole time. Okay, where's the sneezers? And it's just stuff like that that's just fascinating. I just love it.
I have an entire document on my computer of just crazy things that my kids said when they were little. And I will often go through it and read it for inspiration.
Yeah. My sister, when she was little, couldn't say milk, please. And it was please. And like, that sounds like it's a foreign word.
My firstborn, when he was learning to speak, he wanted some grape juice, but he didn't know how to say grape juice, so he would call it grape jing. And so juice became jing. And so that I would, okay, juice is jing. I'll write that down. And so then it just becomes, you just sort of start paying attention to the funny things and you start going, I think I can use my kids. I think I can use them as inspiration for funny dialogue or funny activities.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Another thing somebody complained to me about, that they were just going through too much in their life. Their life was just drama and trauma, and it was interrupting their writing flow because it was too distracting. And in that case, use those feelings, use that drama, pour it into your writing, siphon it off and pour that intensity and that drama into writing. Don't use it as an excuse to not write.
Well, that's the other thing too. A lot of people, well, not a lot, some people will look for excuses to not do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they will then they talk about the drama of how they can't do it. Like there's always some external thing. Like I can't, I'm DC and Marvel won't hire me, or it's too noisy in my house, or my partner doesn't support me, or my kids are too noisy, or the dog barks, or whatever. And there's always going to be a reason.
There's workarounds for all of that.
Yeah, for every single one. I have not encountered a single problem people have that other people haven't had already. I mean, Stephen King was a cocaine freak and he still finished entire books.
I know
So-
somebody else that used to do that too. Used to live close by.
I think we both know this person.
Yeah, very well known writer.
Yeah. And so
Um,
you can, if you really want to do it,
Yeah.
you can overcome all of these problems.
So what if you can't get started in the first place?
What's the problem?
Say you're asked to write something and you have no idea how to even start. Now, for me, that usually isn't a problem, but there's ways to get around that. You can maybe get yourself in the mood by writing a letter to yourself, maybe to your younger self or your
Right.
older self. Going online and getting there's lots of online writing prompts to get you started on writing something. If you don't have an idea,
Yeah.
there's plenty of ideas, writing prompts online that you can get yourself started.
Well, also, it's, if you watch movies from the 30s and 40s that are about writing, it's always, somebody, usually an old white man who's the boss, is saying, I need a story about X by tomorrow. And then that's it. That's the assignment. And that almost never happens. Nobody ever just says, I need this. Write me a story about fire hydrants by tomorrow. It's like, well, no, it doesn't really work that way in the real world. I know it's funny in the movies or the TV show or whatever, but in the real world, you would have a meeting and they would tell you, these are the bullet points for a story about fire hydrants that we want.
I'm talking about getting yourself used to writing. And some people say,
yeah.
I don't even know where to start.
Oh,
write a letter to yourself.
Yes.
Go online and get a prompt. Aliens devour Pittsburgh, whatever. Get a prompt. Start writing of that prompt, and that teaches you discipline.
Yes, because that's the thing too, is you can't sort of write or draw on a sort of willy-nilly basis. You've got to have some kind of schedule. You've got to have some time where you do it on a regular basis, and you've got to get in the habit of doing it on a regular basis, because the more you do it, the fewer obstacles you'll run into.
There's drama in the background. You should write about it, Martin.
Somebody's got drama.
Somebody's getting murdered in the background.
Oh, you guys can hear my boys yelling. My boys, when they go to bed at night, they tend to play a lot, and then they have their stories going. So
that's good though.
But listen in.
That's right.
Get yourself a writing prompt.
That's right.
And you made a very good point about sometimes you're just sitting there and it's just everything grinds to a halt, and you just need to take a break, change the scenery, go to the park, take a camera and a notebook with you, take pictures,
or just
go.
Since writing and drawing are fairly singular jobs, go out with a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Go to the movies, go to dinner, go to lunch, go hiking, go do a thing with a pal.
And speaking of pals and friends, bounce your ideas off of somebody.
Yeah.
Read a section of your book. Say, does this work for you? And it was a little boring for me.
I don't think comic book writers do this. I know screenwriters do this, and I know that novelists do this, where they belong to writers groups where they will read each other's work and critique it. And if there could be one locally where you might be able to find a place for yourself there where you can get some feedback and bounce ideas off.
I think I'd rather do that anonymously, actually, because the critiques would be more, they wouldn't hold back.
Right. You think that would hurt your feelings?
No. I think that if I was friends with somebody and they critiqued my work, they'd try to be nice to me. I want honesty. I want honesty. So I think I would prefer to submit my story to as anonymously to an online group and have them critique me.
Oh, I see.
It would be more honest. They wouldn't be worrying about hurting my feelings because they don't know me from Adam.
Right. Well, that's the thing. You can't bounce your ideas off somebody who's overly sympathetic and doesn't want to hurt your feelings, because it's not about your feelings really. It's about the work, and does the work connect with you? Does the work achieve its goal? don't worry about my precious feelings, because I've been criticized 1,000 different ways. So you can't really hurt my feelings.
Yeah. If you're not prepared to take the heat, you don't belong in the kitchen.
Yeah, and my feelings don't wrap around the work. So if you don't like it and my stuff doesn't connect with you, that's fine. We can still be friends. We can still hang out. I just won't let you read my stuff anymore because it doesn't connect until I get a better idea. Now here's my new idea. What do you think of that? Because I don't, I've been yelled at from some of Hollywood's lesser lights, and it just doesn't faze me.
So now, could sometimes the obstacle appear because when somebody is writing, sometimes you write for the sake of writing. You just want to write something kind of cool.
Right.
Other times people write because they have something that they want to say. Right.
Right.
And could sometimes the block come in when you're trying to say something, but the way you're trying to say it just doesn't, like, you're like, well, this isn't, it ends up not being what you want to say. So then what do you do at that point?
Well, I write, I don't know what it's like for artists, but for me, for writing, I'll just write the terrible version.
Mm-hmm.
It's more important to get it down. Like I will, if the writing is going really well and I'm on some kind of roll, but I don't want to stop and polish everything.
Yep.
Right then, I will just write the terrible version of it.
Yep.
And sometimes I'll put in parentheses, fix this, or this is what I'm trying to say, and I'll just keep rolling because to me, it's more important that I keep rolling and get as much down as possible than it is to make it perfect in that first
draft
pass. Yeah, because I can. The great thing about computers is I can fix it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I'm not retyping anything. I'm cutting and pasting stuff, and I'm editing on the screen, so it's not as big a deal as it used to be, like in the 1930s, where you'd have to have it retyped. So I will just write because the thing is, no one's going to see it except me. So I'll write the horrible version of whatever it is, and I'll going back and fixing it. And that's another way to sort of get motivated is the next day I'll sit down and I'll just read through it again from the beginning, and I'll just start editing from the beginning. And then when I get to where I left off, I'm on a roll and I'll just start filling in more stuff. So my first draft is really like my 12th draft. I will just go through it again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because like I'm sure artists do this too. They erase a bunch of stuff, and
I don't have that luxury.
I
do now that
you do now with the digital, yeah.
Digitally, but yeah, back in the good old days.
But if you're coloring, which I know you're doing, if you don't like the color, you've already made the hold, so you can see what it looks like 10 different ways.
But for 30 years, whatever I put down stuck because I was inking.
Right.
Physically inking, so yes. My lines had to be perfect the first time. That's a big problem with the art phase of it, unless you're digital, which I am now, and I love it because I can go back.
You can go back and you can noodle it again and again and again.
Yep.
Sometimes you can do it too many times again and again and again. So
yeah, when do you stop perfecting it?
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's the thing too. I don't think the work is ever perfect. You just stop.
Yeah.
Just stop.
You're done. Yeah. It's never finished. You're just done.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've gotten. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I've gotten work that I'm finished with it. I'm done. I'm at the end. I've gone through several drafts of it. I really like it. It's great. I'll put it aside. 2 weeks later, I'll go back to it, and it's like, oh, well, I should fix this.
Or 13 years later, as
13 years
the case
later,
of mine.
Because I've got the book that I have coming out from Silverline next year is an animation pitch that I created and sold to Universal Studios like 20 years ago. and they never made it. I got the rights back and I sat on it for a long time. And then it occurred to me, this would make a really good comic. And I went back in and I took out almost everything from the original because it was basically an older version of my writing. And I mean, the idea was still there and the characters were still there and the story was still basically there, but I rewrote everything and made it a fresh comic book. So that's what
where I'm
is.
at.
I never throw anything away.
What I thought was fantastic 13 years ago, it is mediocre now. And I'm butchering it and putting it all back together. I'm here shifting this here, there.
But don't you feel better that you had a place to start from?
Yes. And I'm invigorated,
because you did all that breakdown work.
Yeah. Well, this character doesn't make any sense now. Toss it,
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Do you play music when you write?
No.
Like some people will try to get themselves in the mood by playing music that kind of corresponds to the theme of what they're trying to write.
No, that's
hokey. I don't.
I think, well, everybody can do whatever they want. It's fine. I just think it's a little weird that I'm writing this scene. I need to find the perfect music to get inspired or get creative. It's like,
this is my murder playlist.
Right. No, that would drive me insane to try to figure that out. So I'm actually the worst type of person because I have the TV on 24 hours a day. So my TV is on usually to something in innocuous like sports or game shows or something that doesn't require narrative attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah.
I need the sound.
Right. Okay.
So
I'll play music softly in the background, but it's just like, regular radio station.
I find that stuff just too distracting.
I can't play it too loud, but
no, I have a writer friend who would his office, because his place was small and he had a wife and 2 kids, his office was basically the dining room table, and he had noise canceling headphones on. And that's how he created his sort of Zen-like space.
That's a good idea.
It is because it works, and because he had an understanding partner who knew that he's not going to answer any questions because he's got headphones on.
That's a really good idea, though, for people. It's like, I don't have room for dedicated space. That's a great idea. And
because the thing is, if you're a writer, you just need a computer, a laptop.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do it on a tablet too. You can do it on your phone. There are apps for that as well. And you just need a tiny space and noise canceling headphones, and you can still write. There's really no excuse for not writing.
True. Mm-hmm. I agree. Have you ever asked other well-known writers what their approach is?
Yes. But it's never so formal as, please tell me how. It's never. I never ask it like a student.
Mm-hmm.
It usually is just something that comes up with conversation with other writers that I know, and it's just because it's more like a part of a conversation than it is an interrogation. What I will do is I will read interviews with writers, because in the interview with the writers, they often talk about
their
how
process.
they write and their process and their space. I remember, and this has stuck with me for years. When I was a kid, I read an interview with Isaac Asimov. And this was pre-computers. This was pre-everything. And he had what I thought was a genius idea. He had three typewriters, 3 IBM Selectrics in his office, his writing office. And one was for nonfiction, one was for fiction, and one was for like correspondence and essays and stuff like that. And he always had something going on each of his 3 typewriters. And so when he got tangled up on something, he'd go to the other one and work on that for a while. And then when that tangled up, he'd go to something else on his other typewriter, and he would just go back. He would bounce back and forth between all 3 of them throughout the day. And I thought, that's a fairly genius. I mean, if you could afford 3 IBM Selectrics at that time,
at that time,
sort of a genius way to solve things.
Now you just switch between tabs.
Right. Yes. That's right. Here's my nonfiction tab. Here's my fiction tab. And because I think I have 197 tabs open right now.
I have 2 screens. So, I mean, not 2 screen. I have Chrome up and Safari up on the same laptop, but I can switch back and forth between the 2.
I've got my phone to the right of me. I've got my iPad over here. I've got my monitor behind my laptop. So, there you go.
Yep. I've got another iPad. That's my casual iPad, by the way.
Yeah,
my art iPad is the more expensive one. The iPad Pro is over there. My phone's here. Oh, there's a Floramonte flyby.
Look at that.
Hey, Thomas.
It's not an actual flyby. It's a drive-by.
Are you being kidnapped?
Because
but drive-bys have negative connotations.
I'm trying not to get. I'm done with the bicycle ride, so I was giving you. I just wanted to. So, what's tonight's subject?
We're talking about how do you get the past writer's block.
Okay, so what did Tom say? Because Tom told us some stuff the other night that I wasn't making sure that he came through with what he said that he was going to say.
Oh, and what was that? Pray tell.
There is no such thing as writer's block.
There you go.
That's exactly what he said.
I stuck the landing.
Okay, well, I'm done then. That was my job.
He said there's only writer's obstacles to work around.
Do you get inker's block?
I get to a point where I see something and I'm not quite sure how I want to take care of it, and so then I just move on to do something else, and in the back of my head it's always just kind of running through what the answer is going to be, and then by the time I'm finished inking something else, I figure it out.
And you had said this was a couple weeks ago on the Sunday show. You had said that when you get a new page in from somebody, you always try to ink your favorite things first.
I do that sometimes. I do that a lot. Try to get in, especially if it's a new penciler, somebody that I hadn't inked before. I try to just get past how I'm sorry if I'm stuttering because I'm trying not to run into somebody while I'm in the car. I try to ink some of the fun stuff so that way I get into the groove, and then the rest of it just kind of starts flowing. But if I get stuck on something and I don't know how I'm going to ink whatever it is that the penciler drew, or if I can't figure out, there's sometimes you get some pencils in Barb, and I'm sure she'll agree with me. You don't know what they drew. You'll see that it'll be some sort of like some explosion of some sort, and you're like, what the hell is that? I don't know what that is. And then you start inking the rest of it, and then you go, oh, I see what they were trying to draw, and then you kind of figure it out. Yeah.
Either that or you contact them and says, was this supposed to be a hand?
Yeah, I know.
Or is this 5.6 of dynamite?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you
I've had to do that with Pete a couple of times. I'm like, Pete, what is this? And he goes, that's a hand. And I'm like, oh, I see it now. I got it. All right, I'll fix it. I got it.
You don't ink like panel 1, then ink panel 2, then ink panel 3, then ink panel 4. You don't ink in order, do you?
No.
He's frozen. I used to. They actually did a newspaper article. What'd you say, Thomas?
No. I try to knock out when I can. I try to knock out the backgrounds first, so I set the scene. And then I know what weights to ink the figures and all that kind of stuff. I don't try to do the figures first and then figure the backgrounds in there. I think I got that doing it that way because of all of the the years and years and years that I inked. I ghost inked stuff for Jimmy Palmiotti, which I was just doing, all the backgrounds and some of the minor characters, and then so I'm jumped into the backgrounds first. So I kind of just learned to do it that way, and then it works for me really well. So I can, set the line weights and then ink the figures right, build them up as they need to be.
Back in the old days, when I was working on pencil, not blue line, which is the last decade, but working on pencils, they actually did an article on this because I did it so weird, different from most other inkers. I always started at the bottom right-hand corner and worked my way up because I didn't smudge the pencils. So my hand would never smudge the pencils because I was working from the bottom up.
Well, I always kind of got where whenever I get some pencils in, if I could, and I tried to make sure that I did this, I always went and got good photocopies of whatever pencils were before I started inking them. So that way, if I did, mess up something, I almost said a dirty word. If I do mess up something, I have something to go back to see what I.
That's a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I always made copies. And then, well, and then,
Yes,
I guess it was it was a two-purpose thing. One for if I made a mistake, I had something to go back to, and then also whenever you do ink samples, when you send them to editors, and Tom, you've got these all the time back at Malibu. Yep. You would send a copy of the pencils with the inks, so that way the editors would know what you were, inking from.
It's the only way to know what an inker was dealing with.
Right. Yeah. So it's a two-purpose thing, but I always tried to make a good set of pencil, photocopies. And you always knew which the best photocopier was at Kinko's or wherever.
Yes,
the photocopy
that's a crazy thing. That's a skill that's lost now because you don't need it anymore.
But you would go, and I would wait behind somebody, and there'd be like 5 copiers that were available, and they're like, "Well, what are you waiting behind me for?" And I'm like, "Because I know that's the best copier in the place." Yeah.
There was one. Sorry, go ahead.
After 35 years of inking, I really don't hesitate a lot with inking, but coloring is kind of new for me. So if I'm not positive about the background, I might do 2 or 3 different backgrounds on 2 or 3 different layers.
Yes.
And then I'll this one.
Right.
Yeah. Should go back to this. Go back to this one.
Yeah.
And then I'll test them out, and I'll finally pick out the one I want. Or I'll run several versions past Roland and ask him to pick his favorite out.
Right.
Yeah, I know some digital inkers ink where they're doing everything on separate layers and stuff. I kind of do that a little bit. But I flatten it as I go. I don't try to keep 20 layers of here's all the figures, here's all the backgrounds on this layer, here's all the and then that way you can get a cleaner, because I always try to do a really clean line. So so I can take if there's somebody standing in the way of something that I'm making, or I'm hitting a border, now if you're doing it on the layer, you don't have to stop. You just get that nice stroke all the way through. And you could just, if you were doing it on paper, you would ruin everything that you inked over. But then
that has definitely sped me up switching to digital.
Absolutely, yeah. I think my inks have, because I like a super, I'll do a gritty, scritchy, scratch ink, but I've always liked the nice, real dynamic, clean ink lines.
Say you're throwing some stipple down. You do it on a different layer, and then erase what flows over on the.
Right. Exactly. Yep. Rather than before, where you had to mask everything off, and put either use the liquid frisket over everything, or you put that non-sticky tape over everything, so that way you can flee. Oh god, that was a pain in the butt.
I just like hearing the phrase "throw some stipple down."
Yep, throw some stipple down.
That sounds like an old 1940s work song.
And for $1 a day. Well, folks, we are at the end of our stream. I'm surprised. I was kind of worried that we wouldn't be able to fill a whole hour with this, but we did more. We had plenty.
Well, we get the Tommy drive-by, and that made all the difference.
To add to the writer's block real quick, I had a problem earlier today that Tom helped me with. I was trying to figure out how to write something, and because I don't do a lot of writing, I was thinking about it. I was like, man, this is that stupid writer's block that Tom says doesn't exist. I cannot figure out how to say what it is I'm trying to say. And then Tom kept just throwing this at me, and I'm like, oh, that's what he's trying to say. I wish he would have just wrote it for me, so I didn't have to come up with it.
No, because the only way you learn is, I can do it for you, young man, but the only way you learn is if you do it yourself.
Yeah. And I don't know if what I came up with at the end was Tom level quality, but I think I came up with something that was pretty good at the end.
I like it. It's a good pitch.
Good for you. Okay, folks.
Yep.
All right. Tom, don't get in an accident, Tommy.
Yeah, don't, because I need to see you on Sunday.
I'm trying not to. I know.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in this evening. I want to really thank Tom because I knew if there was anybody of the Silverliners who was going to know the most about the writing tricks, it would be our writer / editor / screenwriter / whatever, master of all, Tom Mason.
So,
For sure.
Wordsmith.
Well,
there
thanks for having me. It's always fun to come on and blast off.
I'm an ink slinger and you're a wordsmith.
But you're also a wordsmith too. So you know.
I am. I'm not known for that one, but I'm working on it.
It's only because enough time hasn't passed.
That's right.
Yeah. So can I leave us with one piece of writing advice that I learned back in the day?
Yes, please.
So this is what I was told. After you've written your thing, go back and throw out all the words, and then after you've done that, throw out the rest.
Start over again.
Yes. Okie doke. As we here at Silverline like to say when we wrap up a podcast, everybody make mine.
Silverline.
I don't have my little.
Hey, I'm G-Rod. Make mine Silverline. You heard me.